So we're back talking about this story about the disappearance of the young child and the Garda's search for remains on waste ground in Donabate, County Dublin. So overnight, this story has, evolved, and we now know that a woman has told Gardaí that the child died in his sleep of natural causes, and that she and her then partner panicked and secretly buried the child in this waste ground. We also know that, Tusla seemed to have had involvement with the child early on in his life. And
Tusla put out a statement last night saying, in the interests of openness and transparency, that they had an interaction with the family in 2020. Now, obviously, this story then that gives it further echoes of the Kyran Durnan case, where Tusla were also involved in Kyran Durnan's life at an early point before he went missing. And it again, I suppose, highlights, is this something that had been preventable? Now, we don't know, of course, the exact details, but it does seem that the missing child, had been in the care of the state at some point.
Was given back to the parents who had possibly considered giving the child up for adoption, or the child was in foster care. And if we're looking at that time frame, they're saying 2020. We don't know whether that was at the beginning or the end of that year. Of course, a year makes a huge difference in a child this age's life. But we're looking at a possible period of the child not being seen within a year of the interaction with Tusla.
Yeah, so the fact that Tusla are involved and putting out this statement, again, this is driven by the Kyran Durnan. Now, there are reports, obviously, about the fact that the child had been taken at a very early age. The parents had voluntarily, I think, contacted Tusla. Or at least that's what was reported. If the child was being considered for adoption, it would be a branch of Tusla, the adoption department of Tusla, which is automatically a different department than if a child goes into foster care in a normal way. If the child is returned and then disappeared, look, I mean, it is absolutely horrific, the whole thing. The fact that the state were involved and aware of something, again, highlights what sort of level of follow-up is occurring for children that are interacting with Tusla. Certainly, there's been reports that the mother has said, and we've only obviously had reports of what the mother may have said. Not
a peculiar story.
A very peculiar story. Let's put it that way.
A very peculiar story that a child should die of natural causes in his sleep
at the age of three.
The age of 3, between the ages of years 3 and 4, and that the mother of the child, along with her then partner, would panic over that to the extent that they would go and dig a hole and bury the child in waste ground near their home. Like, it is a really strange sort of a scenario.
Yeah, I mean,
nonetheless, the Gardaí are searching that land, and obviously, if they do find the remains of this poor child, there will be a post-mortem, and there could be a cause of death from that. I'm just doing a quick search here. We talk about children in care and the state care and all the rest of it. Our population is growing. In Ireland, in January of 2024, there were 5,754 children in the care of the state.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is according to figures that were released from Tusla, the Child and Family Agency. The majority of them, 87%, that's over 5,000, were in foster care, 8% in residential care, and 4% in other care placements. So that is a lot of children.
It's a lot of children.
But I'm not making any excuse for it. I'm just trying to get a kind of a handle on, now, Tusla as an organisation handles different districts. There's different staff in different districts. So we are specifically looking at this Donabate area.
Yeah, so if a child is to be put up for adoption, it'd be handled by Tusla's adoption department, and any placement that's given would be to a degree overseen by that department. They would most of Tusla's child protection services are done on a regional basis. So, like, I don't know, we don't know exact details of what social workers were involved.
And also, just to correct that, I suppose, what we know is that the mother was living in this apartment complex in Donabate.
We do.
At that point.
Yeah.
That isn't to say that the interaction happened from that district or region area.
No.
They could have been living elsewhere. We don't actually know that yet.
No. And of course, a child, if a child is to be put up for adoption, to be put in something called, or at least at that point, which was called pre-adoption care, which would mean that, and of course, if a child is to be put up for adoption voluntarily, that would be a different circumstance again. So obviously we're hearing reports of what the mother is alleged to have said. Children can die tragically in their sleep. I mean, it can happen. Cot deaths, as they're called, are really associated with younger children. Of course, a child could die in his sleep. Any human being can die in their sleep. But I mean, the chances, or the number of children dying at that early age in their sleep of natural causes is minuscule. There's no doubt about that.
Well, in July of 2024, again, these are figures from Tusla, there was 29 children in care the previous year that died in protective services. And of the 29 deaths, 18 were natural causes.
Yeah.
4 were suicides, 5 were as a result of accidents, and 2 were unknown. Again, it's just to give us a kind of an indication of how
and of course
rare this is.
And of course, that would be children that go from, some of them children would have had physical conditions, physical illness, and will be in care. And obviously that goes from the age 0 to 18 as well. A child remains a child until they're 18.
Well, looking at the ages of those 29 who died, 13 were aged under 1 year old, 7 were aged between 11 and 16, 5 between 17 and 20, and 1, a girl, was aged between 6 and 10. So
a lot of those children are dying in the first year of life. You can presume as a result of medical conditions that they may have been born with, or things along those lines. So a child can die. We don't know. As you said, if a body is recovered, there'd be a post-mortem. A cause of death would attempt to be established, though it becomes very much more complicated given the passage of time. And of course, then there is the explanation for panicking, which people, of course, in very serious circumstances can panic, but it's very, very unusual, unheard of. Now, it's a sort of absolutely harrowing case, isn't it?
It's shocking. I mean, I woke up this morning to very early. Somebody was coming in on a flight, and I was listening to Morning Ireland from the minute it started. I usually have it on the radio anyway, but they were detailing this situation that the child was in the care of Tusla, that there was efforts to, or certainly was within the adoption service and was in foster care.
Yeah.
And then appeared to be handed back to the parents is what I sort of awoke to. Obviously, the information from this story is coming bit by bit, and really until there is the discovery of a body, we can't even confirm that the child is dead.
No.
Other than there's been no sign of it. I mean, it's pretty obvious that, a child will be seen, that a child will have to be fed, various kind of simple things like that have to happen. Would probably see a medical doctor at some point. Interestingly, from the 29 deaths I was talking about of children in care, there's further detail on those statistics, right? 2 of the young children of the 29 deaths were murdered.
Yeah.
None of them were in care at the time, but they were in the care of the state, meaning they were probably on the register as such.
Yeah.
And they looked back over 14 years in 2024, from 2010 to 2023. And in that period, 315 children and young people died. 44% died of natural causes. 1 in 4 died as a result of suicide. And, they said that many of them had been referred to child and adolescent mental health services in those cases. So that is probably how they became to be, some of them, in the care system. But surprising figures, really.
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge scandal at a number of years ago about the number of children dying while in the care of the state. There was an investigation carried out by Jeffrey Shannon, who's now he was the well-known child protection expert. He's now a judge, I believe. And you saw a range of circumstances about how children died. Some of them obviously had died violent deaths. There was a number of people with drug problems and died as a result of that, number of children. And of course, children that end up in care are probably the vast majority of them are in vulnerable circumstances, and that's why they end up in care. And so there are going to be tragic outcomes to some of those cases. But what you saw was an unacceptably high number of them and a lack of follow-up, and also some children that were at risk, not being looked after, not being followed up, and not being provided with the services they need. In this case, if the reports are accurate, and we have to presume that they are, this child has been handed back to the parents and obviously then died. And that is something that is going to have to be looked at very, very seriously. Now, Tusla have said that they are obviously engaging with They contacted the Gardaí initially, so that comes from them, and they've said that the agency said that the family requested their services, and they said since 2020 no new referral or new information of concern was received about this child until August 2025, and they said as a result of that they contacted the Gardaí. So, and they say, as is normal process, where there is a serious incident or death involving a child open to or previously known to our service, we conduct a review of our engagement, and that review is sent to the National Review Panel. So that's obviously, the guards are carrying that out. So that is Tusla's position, that they didn't know anything extra. And as soon as they heard any suspicion, they contacted Gardaí and initiated this process under the National Review Panel. Obviously, the broader question is if a child comes to the attention of the state services and then as that case is closed or referral is ended, they obviously are saying that because they didn't receive any new information, that they didn't continue to monitor the child. Is it feasible for every child who comes to the attention of the state to be monitored? Does the state have some responsibility for checking up on the circumstances? Which branch of Tusla were looking at this case had interactions with the parents, and which branch didn't? And all of these questions. But you have to step back and say, and of course Tusla are understaffed and all of these issues, but you have to step back and say, it can't be okay. It can't be something that you say, cases like this, like Kyron Durnan's case, that it's okay for these things just to slip between the cracks. There has to be a way for this not to happen. I mean, that's the least we can expect.
To go back to the facts, I suppose, around this, so it was on Monday that Gardaí took control of that. So this all kicks off actually last Friday, when Tusla report to the Gardaí what they have been told by a woman that the child, they went to investigate because there had been fraudulent social welfare claims made in relation to the children's allowance. And as we were discussing yesterday, sometimes social welfare will send out a check form that you have to get signed by a school or stamped by a school to prove that the child is attending school. If somebody can't do that and sends back the form, it will raise a red flag and they will send it on for investigation to Tusla. When Tusla interviewed the woman, the mother of this child, she gave the details that led to them going to report this to the Gardaí. And by Monday morning, there were Gardaí on that area of open ground in Donabate with skydes and
a cadaver dog
and spades, and they were sort of trying to clear the undergrowth for what would appear to be the initial search. Obviously, that is literally just a search of land. Be very unlikely after so many years to find anything that had just been discarded on the open ground. Be far more likely, if there is to be a find, that it'll be buried underneath the ground. So that search is continuing, and they're describing it now having moved into actual search activity.
Like presumably in these cases, they sometimes scan. They might look for some area that had been disturbed in recent times. So the passage of time is quite significant in this case.
And to get down to what Tusla have actually said, in its statement, it said its previous engagement with the boy and his family a number of years ago. That ceased in 2020. Again, no month in 2020 is given, so we don't know whether that was January or December. Makes a big difference. No new referral or new information of concern was received, Tusla said, about this child until August 2025. On foot of this, we contacted An Garda Síochána with our concerns for the safety and well-being of the child. As is normal process where there is a serious incident or death involving a child open to or previously known to our services, we conduct a review of our engagement, and that review is sent to the National Review Panel. While this has been completed, the priority must be on allowing An Garda Síochána to complete their investigations. And even the new incoming Garda Commissioner, Justin Kelly, has spoken about this. He has confirmed that nobody's been able to identify any information on the boy's current whereabouts or evidence or whether he's alive. It seems to be last seen at 3.5 years of age.
Yeah, and obviously the guards have, while they haven't opened a murder investigation, they said that they're giving the investigation the resources that they would any homicide investigation that allows them, it makes it easier, for example, to intercept digital communications or not to have to seek warrants as they would in the case of a missing person. So obviously the clear concern and in all reality the clear belief is that the child is not alive.
These searches are quite intricate because the Gardaí will want not to disturb anything that might be under the ground, and in order to do so they sometimes have to sort of x-ray the ground above to see if there is any disturbances underneath, and they can see that quite easily because soil sits and settles, and if it's moved, it just shows in these sort of graphs and diagrams which can be x-rayed from above ground. So if there is any sort of an area that'll need to be, it'll be almost an archaeological removal of the soil, because they will really want to keep anything intact that may be there in order to forward this homicide investigation. And homicide investigation, of course, means it could be a natural or an unnatural death. It's an unknown death. So that phraseology is going to be used more and more in the future. You'd wonder if this is resulting in any other further information coming in on the case of Ciarán Durnan, who of course is again a child believed to be dumped dead somewhere.
Yeah, and of course it's a year on, exactly a year on from when the guards launched an equivalent investigation, and there's no recovery of any body. There have been some arrests, but there certainly has been no charges brought. The guards there, as they will be in this case, they're under, it's a very difficult investigation to carry out due to the passage of time. Also due to the limited number of people involved, any capacity they would have, for example, to collect CCTV, because of the time frame, that won't be available in this case. Even phone communications, the phone companies don't tend to keep them, is it after a year or 2 years at this point? But either way, all of that becomes much more complicated with the passage of time. The guards have been very responsive in both of those cases, and have, certainly in the case of Ciarán Durnan, seemed to be absolutely determined and following every route. But these are, really, really complex for that reason. Now
you can certainly see this moving towards a public inquiry anyway.
Well, you can, and Tusla have put out a statement. By putting out a statement, the child was interacting with Tusla. A child being returned to the parents after a number of a period of time, very, very controversial, complicated issue. In the UK, we've seen a lot of what's called forced adoptions by some people, where children are taken into care and they're adopted very quickly by other people. Certainly in Ireland, we've not gone down that route where if biological parents are treated very differently. And look, it's a hugely complex area. There's no doubt about it. But all of that information, what branch of Tusla were getting involved, how that was being communicated, what level of follow-up is reasonable to expect. All of this is going to have to be teased out. We hope, certainly with Kyron Durnan, there was some information became public. There was questions in the Dáil, etc. But again, do we get to the full bottom of how, you see, when these things happen, right? Like, they're really, really shocking and terrible, and they can't be allowed to happen again. And have we got to that point with the Kyron Durnan case? Independent of the murder investigation, have we come to the conclusion to say this is how we could have made sure this didn't happen, or this is where we could have known at an earlier point? I don't really feel like we have, but we certainly seem to need to. And that really has to be the priority.
Well, I just think that, there was talk about COVID lockdowns and all the rest of it. From the dates were actually officially being given, we are there, even though they haven't given a month, have they, in 2020?
No,
there's possibly a reason for that there hasn't been a month given in 2020, because March 2020 was when COVID struck, essentially. Patrick's Day, I think it was, the then Taoiseach Leo Varadkar got up and made a speech to the nation. And following on from that, we had very severe and strict lockdowns. So I find it interesting that we're not given the month.
No. And obviously,
by Tusla, it is obviously significant that we're not. And that child has gone missing before Kyron Durnan, yeah?
Before Kyron Durnan, yeah.
He is last seen in 2021.
Yes.
And again, we're looking at a situation where he's in a school, he doesn't return. In the September.
Yeah.
But that things were a little bit chaotic with schooling, and kids were at home, and a lot of warnings were given around the time of COVID by people, especially people who were dealing with and working with people who might have been suffering from domestic violence. There was a huge concern about people who were in abusive marriages, that, they no longer had their outlet to go out to meet their friends, to do all this sort of, perhaps both these stories will be something to do with the way things were handled during those times.
Yeah, and obviously, the people had to work from home during COVID, including social services. Did that play a role? If somebody is calling to your door, a social worker, is that very different than if somebody is phoning up? Or, we don't know. Obviously, we don't know. I mean, COVID certainly must have played a role in this.
But it also didn't go on forever. So what happened after COVID?
No, exactly.
So what happened after those lockdowns? If both these children sort of went missing at chaotic emergency times in the country, how did things go back to normal, and why weren't their cases followed up?
Exactly.
In the aftermath of that?
Or is there follow-up of cases, and is there communication?
Is there a backlog of stuff? All these questions anyway have to be answered, but it is interesting that we're focusing in on that particular year that this child
it is interesting.
Is last seen alive.
And look, the final word is, you can't have these things happen, and we should not allow it or say it's normal, and that's not assign blame before we know who is, what did happen, but it just cannot be allowed to happen.
Okay. I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.